Welcome back. Today in this video, I am not going to play a live game. I'm not going to solve any puzzles. I'm not even going to analyze one of my previous games. What I am going to do is refamiliarize myself with e4 as the first move for white. And what I've done is I've pulled up the analysis board on Lichess and I've opened the opening book, which is partially blocked by my camera view, but I think you can still see the move names and the numbers next to them. I've mentioned over the past few videos that I am planning on switching to e4 as my main opening for white, or at least temporarily just to see how it works out. And I'm aware that because I'm unfamiliar with e4 positions, that my rating might drop a little further before I kind of catch on. But when I say I'm unfamiliar with e4, I don't mean I'm completely unaware of it. I am aware that it is the most played first move by white for the last couple of centuries. I'm aware that it's currently the most played move in master level games. I know that it's called the King's Pawn opening. I know that Bobby Fischer said it's e4 is best by test. And I do know several popular responses to it. I'm going to check the opening book to make sure that I know what the most common responses to it are. Now this is the master's database. e4, the most common response is c5 at the master level, according to the Lichess database. e5 being the second most common. So c5, e5, e6, which is here, and c6, which is the Caro-Kann defense. That's here. Okay. So either the c-pawn or the e-pawn is what's played at the master level. But I am probably, or almost never, going to play any titled players. So I'm going to look at the Lichess players database, which not only has far more games, but I can set this to look at only players in my rating range. So I'm going to use the settings here. I'm going to take off, I'm going to make sure that bullet is not on there. I'm even going to take off blitz and correspondence. So I'm just looking at only rapid and classical. And let's see, the rating range is, I'm going to take off the 2,500 rated players and the 2,200 rated players because I'm probably not going to face those either. So I'm going to check from 1,400 through 2,000, which is a little below, a couple hundred points below and a couple hundred points above where I am, and click all set. Okay, it does show that e5 is the most common response here at our level, 150 million games. About a third of that is c5, which is the second most common response here at our level. e6 being the third most common response with half of that. So we went from 156 million games, only a third of that played the Sicilian, which is c5, and only half of that played e6, which is the French, if I'm not mistaken, and d5. I'm trying to get different colors for all of these, but there we go. D5, the Scandinavian Defense. Those are the four most common responses to E4. Now what I'm going to do here in this video, this is something I was going to do off of video, but I decided if I'm going to do it anyway and spend some time here, I might as well do it on video. Hopefully any of you that are relatively new to chess might get something from this, and there might be some of you that, like me, are trying to choose an opening or trying to switch to E4 from D4 or some other opening that you've been playing. Or maybe you've just been playing random first moves as white and maybe this will help. But for me, it's a refresher course. I'm going to try to figure out what I'm doing if I'm going to play E4 first. Okay, the fifth most common is the Caro-Kann defense, which is what I have been playing as black against E4. But I think because I have studied the Caro-Kann defense from black's perspective, and by study, I don't mean what titled players mean when they say they've studied an opening. I mean, I've learned the first several moves of most of the most common branches of the Caro-Kann defense. And since that's the fifth most common here with only 16 million responses, I'm going to look at the five most common. Okay, let's start with E5. E5 is, we're still in the King's Pawn game. I do know that. And I think what I usually played, the few times that I have played E4 in the past, I think I got this knight out here to F3, and that says that is by far the most common second move for white in this position, with bishop to C4 being second most common, F4, which I think that's the King's Gambit, is it not? F4 and D4. And that's interesting. Now, according to this database, again, it's behind my camera view, but the win rate is higher with F4 and D4 than it is with knight F3 or bishop to C4, which were the two pink lines here, the two pink arrows are the two most common second moves for white, with the knight move being the most common. But the two yellow arrows here have a higher win rate, especially F4, which makes me wonder if I shouldn't look at that. Maybe try to play the King's Gambit. But the most common one, I do know this because I have played it, and then the most common response by black is knight to c6. I do know that. And if I put the bishop on b5, I know that's the Ruy Lopez. And I think if I put it here on c4 at this point, that's the Italian game. Is that what that's called? Will the name show up there? Yes, the Italian game. Okay, I was aware of that because that was one of the very first openings that I was looking at back when I first became aware that openings had names, which was a couple of years ago, right after I got back into chess. So Italian game, Ruy Lopez, sometimes called the Spanish game. And I see that played a lot at the master level. I saw that, we saw that, 3 or 4 times in the recent World Championships. D6 is the next most common response by black here besides moving that knight out, and it's far less common, which that would be the Philidor defense. Okay, I have heard of that as well. I didn't remember which positioning the pawns had here, but I knew it was slightly less common, the Philidor. And in that case, then I would put the bishop out here or play d4 again. Well, let's back up then to the second move. If black responds with e5, d4 is the 4th most common move by white, but it's far less common than knight to f3. So when black plays this in response to my e4, they're expecting this. This is what they see most of the time at our level, knight to f3, and probably at the master level too. If I switched over there, yes, that's by far the most common at the master level too. But bishop to c4 has a higher win rate at the master level. Interesting. So does d4 even. We'll switch back to the Lichess players database. Okay, what's this called? That's called the center game. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it looks like they would take this pawn and then I would take back with the queen, or would I let it go in order to double their pawns? This is showing that if they take, which is by far the most common move here, and I would suspect so by far, like more than 10 times as common as the next move. I would expect them to take, and then I would take back with my queen. But see, it says if I take back with my queen, then black has the higher win rate. What does Stockfish show here? Stockfish says now black has a very slight advantage. Very, very slight. It's very close to even, and it strongly recommends, wait a minute. No, it's saying that these two are equal. Knight to f3 or queen takes are equal, and that's to a depth of 46. So what if I take back? Now it says it's equal, and it says that black would play here, but would they, or would they immediately attack my queen? According to the player's database, they would immediately attack my queen, and then would I put it back on its home square? That's the most common move in the database, but Stockfish says put it here on e3, and we're still even, but my opponent is unfamiliar with this position probably. They would probably do this. Was that the most common? Yes, but not by far. It's either d6 or this. Okay, well, let's say they did that, and then I play bishop to d2. Am I preparing to yeah, I'm preparing to castle queenside is what it looks like. Stockfish says that's the only move that maintains equality, and then my opponent would probably play bishop to e7, but we're down to just a couple of thousand games per move here already. So chances are my opponent never would have made it to this point if I've played this series of moves to this point. They might play bishop to e7. They might play b6 in order, I assume, to get out the light squared bishop. They might play d6 in order to get out the light squared bishop. Well, let's say they played the one that Stockfish recommends the highest, and then I would play knight to c3, and I'm prepared to castle already, but so are they. And of the few thousand games that have reached this position on Lichess, almost all of them they have castled here, and almost all of them we have castled here, and that's what Stockfish says we should do. But wait, back up. It says here, if I long castle, I will have a plus 0.1 advantage, which is about even. But once I actually do it, Stockfish changes the evaluation and says black actually has a slight advantage. Okay, so the center game, I am going to discard. I'm going to back up to this position and probably just play knight to f3 here, because that's what most people do, and it looks like white still has a slightly greater win rate. And these are the two most common responses for black at this point, although knight to f6 sometimes happens here too. Not nearly as often as knight to c6, because knight to c6 protects this pawn, which I'm currently attacking, whereas knight to f6 does not. And I believe this is, it says it's the Russian game. I thought this was called the Petrov. Maybe it's called both, or maybe I'm wrong. Okay, because here now we're attacking each other's pawns, so I should take their pawn, right? And then would they take mine? It says that Stockfish says that they shouldn't, and the database says that they usually don't. It says they usually play either this knight here or this pawn to d6. Those are the two most responses. But again, backing up one, both Stockfish and the database say I'm most likely to see this, which is the king's knight opening normal variation. And bishop to b5 is the top move recommended by Stockfish, with c4 coming in a close second, and those two are the top moves in the database, which we've already covered, the Ruy Lopez and the Italian game. Okay, I don't want to go too deep into this because, as we know, on every single move, the opponent has multiple options. It's pretty rare in an opening for there to be an only move that's not a blunder, so they have several options. And even here, even at this point, we know that black has 20 legal moves. They can move any of their 8 pawns, 1 square or 2 squares, and they can move either one of their knights to 2 different spots each, for a total of 20 legal moves. I can't prepare for all of those. But I am expecting e5 because it is the most common move here, and it looks like I should just play knight to f3. I think the reason here, and the reason that my next move is the bishop to one of those 2 squares, is because I want a castle. And that may be one of the reasons that these are some of the most popular openings for white, is because we get to castle quickly. That's one difference with the queen's pawn opening, is we don't get to castle as quickly. Because if we castle queenside, we've got 3 pieces to move. If we're going to castle kingside, we still have to move the e-pawn at some point to get this other bishop out here before we can castle. So I think that might be one advantage of e4 that I've been missing with d4, is that I don't get to castle as quickly. When I play with d4, very often my opponent playing with the black pieces castles before I do. I think that's as far as I'm going to go with e5 right now. Again, because there's so many possible variations. They can play the Petrov, they can play into the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game. They can play the Philidor. What's the next most popular? Queen to f6 is the 4th most popular response here, which is called the King's Pawn game McConnell Defense. That's actually a defense. Well, it does guard that pawn. Stockfish says if they did that, I should just get the other knight out, not my bishop for some reason. Interesting. Or a4. Wow. Yeah, Stockfish, she's like, hey, you could play a4 here. That'd be fine. Well, what in the world would that do? I have no idea. Okay, but what if they don't play e5? What if they play the next most common, which is this? According to the players database on Lichess, again, compressed a little bit to be closer to my rating, not including the absolute lowest rated players, not including the absolute highest rated players, the Sicilian. I believe, okay. Well, Stockfish says either knight is fine, but I think I've seen knight to f3 most often, and the players database agrees. It says bishop to c4 is the 2nd most common move, or d4. I think, isn't d4 the Smith-Morra gambit? It is the Sicilian Defense Smith-Morra gambit. Okay, I remembered that. I remembered that from a tournament on chess.com where the position already started this way. Every game in the tournament began with this position on the board, and it was black's turn. I think here they're supposed to take, and then what do I do after they take? Interesting. Most people take back. I don't like that because I don't like gambits. Except the queen's gambit, which it really isn't a gambit. Most of these others are gambits, and it requires the opponent making a mistake over the next few moves. So I think knight to f3 or knight to c3, which is again what the engine suggests, and by far the most common in the database is knight to f3. Okay, so what if that's what they're expecting because that's what everyone plays? And Stockfish says knight to c3 is just as good. What if I play that? That says they'll still probably put their knight here. That's what I've usually seen in the Sicilian Defense once they get the c-pawn up, is they put that knight behind it. And that's the most common move here, d6 being the next most common. And d6 is one of the top 3 moves recommended by Stockfish, as is a6. I don't know what a6 does other than prepare perhaps b5. Oh, a6 would protect that square. Oh, because maybe they're worried about my knight coming in here or my bishop coming in here. That's what a6 does. Okay. And that is the top move recommended by the engine here if I played knight to c3. I wonder how many people know that. It's not one of the, it's the 5th most common response in the database. So I probably don't have to worry about that. And it's okay because I'm probably not intending to put one of my 2 pieces over there. Okay, but they will probably play knight to c6 anyway. And then I will play knight g to e2. Really, blocking in my bishop, what it says. And then what would my opponent do here? According to the database, we're already down. If I play this move, we're down to 7,000 games. Or we're down to 30,000 games. 7 to 6,000 with each move. Okay, but before that, we're at 500. We're at 500,000 games here. Over 1 million if you count every response. But knight to f3 is what most people play here as white, or f4, or bishop to c4, which is here. That's what most people play in this position. Okay, so what if I play here then? We're in the Sicilian Defense closed chameleon variation. See, maybe this is what I need to learn then because it'll throw my opponent off. They haven't seen this before. And if they play the most common move, which is either e6 or g6 or knight to f6. Those are the 3 most common next moves for players at my level. Well, let's say they do g6 because they're planning on fianchettoing here. Then now I can play d4. Okay, that was why I put the knight here, to put a defender on d4. So I can play d4, and if they take it, I'll take back with the knight. And they won't take back because my queen is right here guarding that. Nice. Okay, and we're already down to just a few thousand. Okay, so let's say they did take back, and I would take back. And they play here. Okay, well that puts 2 attackers on this. Then what do I do? Oh, then I put Then I get this bishop out to e3. Okay, well, they'll probably play that because they intended to. And bishop to e3 is the best move recommended by Stockfish. Oh, but the database says we're now back up to 500,000 games. So this must have transposed into something that existed previously in a different position. I bet it transposed from the knight being out here on f3 and taking there on d4. It's just that it was uncommon to go to g3. Okay, so yeah, we're back to 500,000 games now instead of just a few thousand. And I would play here, and then they would get this knight out, and then I come here, and we're still at over 100,000 games that have reached this position on the player's database. And they're going to castle is the most common move, and then am I going to castle? That is the most common move here. And Stockfish says we're about even. I think most of those moves seemed pretty natural to me. I think I can remember this. That if my opponent plays the Sicilian, that instead of doing the expected move, knight to f3, I can do an unexpected move and kind of throw them off by playing knight to c3. Maybe it won't matter. And then when they play that, then I play knight g to e2. Again, throws them off. They're not sure what to expect. But I'm not sure what to expect either because, again, it could be g6, it could be e6, it could be knight to f6. We just don't know. And it probably won't matter in the long run whether my knight is on e2 or on f3 because either way, I'm aiming to play d4 here in a minute. Backing up, a third most common response by white is e6, which is the French. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I'm supposed to play d4 here. That is the most common response. Stockfish has that as one of the top 3 moves, again, along with one of the 2 knight moves out to c3 or f3. And d4 and knight to f3 and bishop to c4 are the 3 most common moves in the database, with d4 being by far the most common. We're now in the French defense, and I'm pretty sure they play d5 here. That was the whole reason for them playing e6, right? Yeah, d5 10 times as common as the previous move. And now do I push forward? No. Oh yes, that's what most people do at my level. They either take or push forward. Stockfish says taking or pushing forward is fine, but knight to c3 is better, okay? And then most people here play their knight to f6 even though I can push now, but then they would bring it back there. Okay, well see, that's what I'll try to remember if I do, or when I end up facing the French, is after I play here and they play there, instead of taking or pushing, which is what I thought, and what are the most common moves, I would play the third most common move here, which defends this, puts an extra attacker on that, and I can expect at this point either getting my knight pinned or the knight to f6. And if they play knight to f6, then I'll push. If they play here, I will also push. Either way. Well, I'll try to remember all that. I might not, but maybe while editing this video, I will be going through these same pieces again. I think I'm going to make some little text boxes that will pop up on the screen, as I'm saying these moves, and maybe that also will help reinforce this for me. Okay, well, let's say they don't play e6. What was the 4th most common? d5, the Scandinavian. Those of you who have been on my channel for a long time, very few of you, know that I used to play the Scandinavian almost exclusively before I switched solidly to the Sicilian Defense and began trying to learn it. The Scandinavian, as I said in a video a year and a half ago, I liked it because it's fairly forcing. There's only one really good move for white here, and that's to take. And once they do, usually black takes back with the queen, and then I can immediately attack it with my knight. There is the modern variation, I think that's what it's called, where the knight comes out here and attacks this. And now my best move is to let it go. Most people here play knight to c3 to defend the pawn, but you can't defend it because they're going to win it, right? So Stockfish says let that pawn go, get a knight out. Then they're probably going to take it with one of those 2 pieces. It doesn't matter which one. Most people, I think, will go with the knight, then play d4, which is defended twice. And then what are they going to do? They're going to get a bishop out to here. Most people play here to pin it, but then I can attack the knight immediately. If they take here, I take back, and I'm pretty good. So I think I understand that. I think I understand that. Unlike a lot of the opponents that I faced when I was playing the Scandinavian, and I still do play the Scandinavian sometimes in bullet, most people will take, and that's fine. And I usually do play the modern variation. But then I don't, like, why are they trying to defend it here? So I think if I'm playing with white here, when they play that, I just get this out. When they do take back, I play d4. Now what if they take back with the queen here, which I think is the most common. Okay, now if they take back with the queen, I do play the knight to c3 first. And I think what I usually see is them going all the way back, but I think they also go over here, right? So let's say they go all the way over here, and I don't play that variation of it, so I'm not sure. And then I get out the other knight, and I'm preparing to castle after getting this bishop out. It says they'll probably get this knight out. Oh, it says I should play d4 first. Okay, that's what most people do here. And then there's a bunch of choices for them, although I think pinning this knight is fairly common, but then I can just play here and castle. But that wasn't my best move according to Stockfish. Yeah, Stockfish says push the bishop immediately. Prompt it now to take. And once they do, I would take back. I'm defended there. The pawn is undefended, but nobody's attacking it. And white's just up here. Well, those are the four most common responses to e4 in the Lichess players database. e5, which we know. c5, which is the Sicilian Defense. e6, which is the French. And d5, which is the Scandinavian Defense. My colors are all mixed up. There we go. Those are the four most common responses, the things that I need to worry about the most if I'm going to play e4. I'm not going to say, I think I'm ready now, because I know better. I know that there's a lot more to it than what I just looked at. I also know that I'm going to mix up the move orders of what I just looked at when I actually sit down to play the game, even if I have plenty of time, like 15-10 or something like that. I'm going to play e4. My opponent's going to play one of those four moves, most likely, and then I'm going to forget what my next best move was. But I think if I do it several times, and if I start playing e4 exclusively in other games too, bullet, blitz, whatnot, I think I'll get the hang of it. Thank you for being here. Again, I was going to do this, not on video, go through this, but I thought to myself, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the screen, and all I got to do is make sure the camera's on and click record and go through this myself. Now, if I had gone through it without the camera, I was also going to have a notepad open and start taking notes as well. But since I did record it, I'm going to take those notes while I'm editing the video. And like I said, maybe you've already seen them if I did this. Put some text boxes up on the screen. And those of you who do play e4, feel free to throw me some hints. I'm not that interested in, you probably know this about me by now, but I'm not that interested in gambits or traps and tricks like the fried liver, for example. I am aware of the fried liver, but I'm not going to be throwing my bishop and knight in there when I haven't finished development yet. I'm still at that stage of, I guess, lack of confidence or being an early novice that not only do I not like it when my opponents do that, because I'm just trying to practice getting my pieces out and learning those things, but I don't like to do it myself because it's bad practice, especially if I do aim to get to a higher level. I know there's still traps and tricks and gambits. The higher you can get up to 2200, 2400 and still be facing some pretty cheap tricks, but they seem to get less common the higher up that you go. But the reason that those people got there in the first place is that they were aware of how to foil each of those traps and tricks. So it is something that I will face. It's something that I'm going to look at, but I don't want to learn them myself as a main weapon. But if you have just some good ideas or tips or tricks for doing solidly at e4, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for spending your time here. I'll see you next time.